All right, so we just have some questions to ask you about various topics about magic.
Yeah.
And the first one is, what is magic?
Oh, it's one of those questions. Well, it's a dramatic art form where we try to illustrate uh, impossibilities, sort of. Well, that's not right either. It's a way to sort of play a cat and mouse game with our spectators, an intellectual cat and mouse game. And it's I've been thinking a lot about this, and what I get to is like horror movies are popular for some reason, even though it shouldn't be. If we just look at it like objectively, that why on earth would you want to put yourself in a situation where you know that you will become scared, right? Um, and it's a way to play with those feelings that we know that we will have at some point in a safe environment. We can sort of titillate ourselves with that, and no actual danger is happening. And I think with magic, you get something similar, but it's a way to play with insanity rather than danger. It's a way to experience how one thing and its outcome isn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily follow each other. It's a way to experience like oh, there's a Latin term for it that escapes me now, but non sequitur moments where we know that if we put that there and do this, then this happens. And when something else happens, we feel like our minds doesn't work anymore. And since it's in a safe environment, it's a titillating. Well, it's a lot of words, and in the end, I think the real answer is I have no idea.
So, some of the same explorations can happen in traditional theater that you've talked about. So, how
Yeah.
does magic differ from traditional theater?
Uh, well, in theater, it requires a willingness from the spectator, a willingness to get caught up in the story, like when Peter Pan is flying, you sort of edit out in your mind the wires that you very clearly see. And that's not the same kind of feeling that you get when you realize that, wait a minute, there are no wires. This 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 is this can't happen. And you look around and to see if everyone else is experiencing the same thing. So so no, it's related to theater, but it's aiming for a completely different kind of reaction.
Okay, so shifting back a little bit to magic itself. So, if you had
Mhm.
to categorize magic tricks, what would you see as the main categories?
Uh, I'm not sure I understand the questions. I mean, I could blurt out things that I guess is what you're asking for, but could you rephrase the question?
So just like in your own opinion,
Yeah.
if different magic tricks were able to be categorized into main categories of all kinds of different tricks, what would you see as the main categories of different tricks?
Well, oh, that's a good one. I don't really know. I would probably make a separation between like social conversational magic and the formal performance magic. Like one is that you do among your friends and you just happen to do something, and or you emulate that atmosphere that you, even though you as a magician plan it like a stage performance, the expression or the how it's perceived is still like a bit haphazard, like, oh, we're out with a couple of friends and this just happens. That's a bit different from a formal magic show, I would guess. So that's two main categories.
So, building off of that a little bit, so what are some examples of tricks that fall into each category? And some other people, if it makes it easier, who have answered this question, they kind of come up with like a taxonomy of magic effects. So maybe if there's one that like comes to mind for you and why.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sort of groomed into thinking about magic according to a certain taxonomy, and it is taking me a while to liberate myself from that kind of thinking, because in the end I found those brackets, I found them to be an obstacle for me as a creator of magic. Like, among the first thing I did was to think that, oh, this will be for this environment with this kind of traditional prop, and it will be this kind of basic effects. And I noticed that all my creations, the more like that I thought, the more similar my creations became, and the more boring it was to be a creator. So obviously, if you are researching magic, it's very useful to have a classification system to sort of sort it down in, if you're a historian or if you're a researcher. But for me as a creator, I find that kind of thinking very limiting. I want all the doors to be open. So I don't know if that answered your question. Yeah.
So our next question is a little bit different. So what differentiates good magic and bad magic?
Bad magic is lacking the cat and mouse game. It's usually a single layer deception, and it's usually where the dramatic effect and what causes it happens at the same time, even. Like there was a trick on the market a while ago, where you took a bottle cap and then you put a stick through it and pull it out again, and it was whole. It was unharmed, and it was just a kind of a James Bond gadget that looked like a top. So when you put the stick into it, it opened, and then when you pull it out, it closed, and you showed it. And the moment someone thinks that, oh, there's probably something sneaky with that bottle cap, the illusion is ruined. There's no mystery left. While good magic tricks, I would say, is tricks that you can explain in detail for the audience, and then immediately perform it when they know everything, and they will still go, how is this possible? When there's several when at least three deceptions are working in collusion with each other, it doesn't matter if you know what's happening, because your gut reaction will be a reaction of surprise. So I would say that good and bad tricks is all about the structure of them.
So I know you've talked a few times now about like the cat and mouse game of magic. So can you expand a little bit more on what exactly you mean by that?
Well, when you create a piece, you sort of have to think like, okay, so this happens. So what would be let's say we have two ways of thinking. We have the one way of thinking, which is sort of rule-based, which is very fast. You can jump to conclusions, and it's a very black and white. It's this or that, this or that. And it's almost binary in nature, and it's a rule-based, and it's based on past experiences. It's based on preconceived ideas. It's based on prejudice. It's based on everything that makes us human, good or bad. And then we have the analytic thinking, which requires much more work, and you have to make an effort to think like that. And what I want when people are looking at me, I want them to rely on the rule-based thinking. So what I'm doing, that I create a situation, then I put myself in the spectator's view, and I see, okay, what conclusion will he jump to here, right? And then I go back to the magician's perspective, and I say, okay, he will jump to this conclusion. How can I do something else while reinforcing the idea they have jumped to? So I sort of create a fork in the thinking tree, sort of like they go left and I go right, and I give hints about going. So I give small false hints to encourage the spectator to move on in the wrong direction. And then I look at it again, and I realize that, okay, at some point, the spectator will realize that they are way off. So they will jump to a different conclusion. And I try to figure out, okay, if I was a spectator, what kind of binary conclusion would you jump to from that? So, and that's what I mean with cat and mouse games, that I not only plan for the desired path, I also explore the forks in the path which are undesirable for me, and how I can put stops, put gates in those. It's to sort of, yeah, my English doesn't quite isn't sufficient enough to really explain in detail what I mean, but I hope you understand a little bit what I mean with the cat and mouse game.
Yeah, I think I understand what you mean. Yeah. Do you think you could come up with like a concrete example of a trick situation where, like, as you're presenting the trick, this would happen and how you would apply that?
Well, I mean, if you look at the simple false transfer, for example, that you have something and you pretend to take it. Now I know if I open the hand immediately, they will jump to the other hand first, right? And second, they will jump to the sleeves, because that's the closest hiding place you can a lay person can think about. So if I know that this is the how they will jump in their things, then I can put stops for it in various places. I can do it beforehand, like I pretend to take it, and now I ditch this before I do anything else, so I can go up with this hand, and now this is cancelled out. I can also sort of move my sleeve back. So now suddenly I have cancelled two possible ways for the spectator to go before they know that is where they would have jumped to. And now I can sort of make it vanish, and suddenly it's more powerful because there's no way for them to go.
Yeah.
Because I burnt each bridge on the way.
Well, thank you. So now we're interested in finding the boundaries between magic and other forms of entertainment. So we kind of have a list of different ones that we're going to ask you, and you're going to say if you think they're magic or not and why. So the first one is pickpocketing magic.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an interesting combination, because a usual explanation model for the spectator is that I'm relying on the speed of my hands, like I didn't understand how that happened. You worked too fast with your hands, like, and you can sort of decide that, okay, let's play with that as a theme. What else can I do that reinforces that explanation model? So even though pickpockets, as a stage pickpockets, sometimes rely on magic tricks that isn't perceived as magic tricks, but is perceived as very advanced pickpocket things. It's not really perceived as magic, I think. I would call that like a related art rather than an example of the art.
So the next one is, are visual or optical illusions magic?
No, I think it isn't. Because I think, and this is very this is me answering for me. I'm not answering for my whole profession. So probably should say that that goes for everything I'm saying here. My views are not necessarily the views shared by all my peers. In some ways, yeah. So what were you saying? Optical illusions. No. According to what I have found in my meager studies in this, is that there need to be a human agent involved for magic to be perceived as magic. Like you can build some kind of mechanical contraptions, like a chest, for example, that is mechanical, that you open it once and you have some gold coins in the bottom of the chest, and when you close it, that mechanically makes the bottom swings around, and next time you open it, it's empty, and you close it and now it's coins, empty. you can build some kind of mechanical contraption that makes this happen. And I think that if someone goes into a room, sees this, and open a couple of times, people will just assume that, oh, this is some kind of mechanical contraption that I don't understand. But have the same thing and put a person next to it who every time the chest closes goes, whoa. And suddenly I think that this thing will be perceived as magic because there's a human agent taking credit for it. And I think that suddenly this kind of mechanical thing will be perceived as something mystical.
So the next one is, our sideshow demonstrations magic?
No, I don't think so. But same there. I mean, I know sideshow artists who rely on deception and even magic techniques in order to appear like a sideshow thing. That they might actually put some skewers through the skin and through the here, and they do that for real. And then suddenly they put some razor blade in the mouth and eat some string and pull it out, and it's a and people will not perceive that as a magic trick. They will think that he's internally created differently. They would see it as a biological oddity rather than a magic trick.
So what about gambling demonstrations? Do you think that those are magic?
No. I'm all negative here. No, I don't think so. It's even though like there's a lot of magicians who make fake gambling demonstrations. And I think that at some point, those performers usually forget that they are doing a gambling demonstration and start to do magic tricks while talking about gambling. And I think when they reach that point, I think the audience also switches over to perceive it as a magic show rather than because there's a point where you can't explain it anymore with skill alone. So yeah, a card magician who is doing gambling demonstrations, I would say that as soon as they leave the authentic gambling demonstration and start to rely on magic tricks, I would say that also changes the performance from gambling demonstration to magic performances.
Okay, so do you think that mentalism is magic?
Yes. And I think within the field of magic, we are quite careful about separating it. Like oh, there's magic, and there's mental magic, and then there's mentalism, which is the purest form of it, because you don't rely on props and gadgets and stuff like that. And I think this is distinctions which only are relevant and important for us in the field. I don't think. I mean, if we look at one of my big heroes, Max Maven, I think that even when he did his most straightforward mentalist show, I'm pretty sure that most people call him magician anyway. And also I think that mental illness is vastly different from psychic fraud. And I know that some people in the mentalist bracket are quite their boundaries are a bit hazy and fuzzy on that thing. And yeah.
So do you think people like Uri Geller are magicians?
No. I mean, it's difficult now when he's getting older and the public has become more educated. But he was very insistent on not being referred to as a magician during most of his career. And I think he made quite a lot of money in shady ways in pretending to be a psychic. So I know now when he is, in recent years, he has getting closer to the magic field, started to hang out with magicians and want to meet up with magicians at magicians conventions and stuff like that. And I think he's just getting alone because it's difficult to be a fraud, I guess. It's a very lonely life. So I think that he would like the fellowship of magicians, but he has tricked so many rich and probably dangerous people that he is genuine in his psychic powers. So I don't think he dare to cross over properly.
So do you think that an effect is magic if it uses camera tricks?
Sorry, could you say that again?
So is it magic if it uses camera tricks?
Mm-hmm. The thing is that a good rule for magic is that don't use what people will expect unless you have a way to cancel it out. And if you are on television and they just have watched Shazam and the Avengers and stuff like that on TV, and there's a magic show, there is an assumption that you will use camera trickery. And that's the reason not to, because you should not use the method that people are jumping to. Unless you have a way to cancel it out, like make people believe that you are not using camera tricks, because then I think you can use it. And as an example of that was David Blaine's first television specials, where they work with a handheld camera. And at that point in history, they couldn't do camera trickery a lot with the handheld camera. So just by using a handheld camera was a signal to people that we are not using camera trickery. And that meant that he, in one point, could use camera trickery to amplify an effect for the viewers at home. So he did an effect for the people in place that was similar, but wasn't sort of camera proof. If you looked at it over and over, you would figure it out, but you got good reaction for the people standing there. And in that, they made an insert of a camera tricked sequence that is impossible to perform in real life, while they still had audio reactions from the live audience. And that worked excellent, because they had sort of cancelled out the possibility of camera trickery, and that is why it was a clever idea to use the camera trickery there. But yeah, in short, I would say that camera trickery is a thing you should stay away from as a magician if you don't have a really good understanding of when it can be used.
So do you think it's magic if it uses stooges?
It can be. The problem is that when you use a stooge, there's always one in the audience who is less impressed than everyone else. And for me, that's a trade-off that is I don't like. I sort of but then again, you can sort of, if you have a trick which is based on several principles, and you use a stooge for just one of the things, then in fact you have a stooge who are as surprised as everyone else about the outcome, because they only know the part they were involved with, and that part in no way can accomplish what they perceive is happening later. So it can be done. But I would say that people who are jumping to stooge as a method, like having that as a primary method, they often over rely on it to the degree they are using it for everything. Even things where you don't need a stooge. And when you over rely something, then it can be discovered. This is also part of the cat and mice game, that if you have 4 and 5 things in a row that can be explained with, oh, there's probably someone playing along, then you have lost the cat and mouse game. So yes, clever use of stooges, and clever what's the opposite of generous? Yeah, if you are withholding that, if you have like if you create like 100 pieces of magic, then one trick can rely in part
using it sparingly.
on a stooge. Yes, sparingly, very sparingly. Yeah. Because that's an explanation that people jump to. So yeah, that's usually and it's a tricky one to cancel out if you are using a stooge. That's it's life is easier if you don't use it.
So we're also curious whether you think things like contact juggling, cardistry, or escapes are magic.
No. I mean, there are there are benefits from using those things, that you can add things that is difficult to add with magic alone. So I would say from a performance point of view, those things can definitely be useful and welcome, and can help you to create a certain atmosphere. For example, I have a friend, a Spanish friend, who make big crystal balls appear and disappear. And in between making that, he's making contact juggling of them, and suddenly one goes away and another one. And the contact juggling definitely add a lot of magical feeling to it. But if we only did that, it would be a bit boring, I think. So yeah, it can add, but it isn't.
So do you think the use of a secret method is necessary for the experience of magic?
Not necessarily. I mean, if it's a well-constructed trick, you don't need to be secret. Is my I think that using secrecy and lack of knowledge as your main tools as magicians, that's a rather old and primitive way to look at things. I know that good magic tricks, it doesn't matter if people know exactly how you do it, because the way the brain is constructed, that when we perceive it when we experience it in the proper tempo and in the proper situation, we can't stop our brains from perceiving it as magic, even though we know exactly what it is. Like I keep nothing secret. Like if someone asks me, how did you do that trick? I tell them, provided that it's my creation, and provided I have time, because if they ask me it during a performance, I don't stop the performance. I say, ask me about it afterwards. And if they approach me afterwards and still want to know, I tell them.
So now we're going to shift a little bit to talking about misdirection. So the first question is, what is misdirection?
It's an umbrella term that basically means everything and nothing. It's the further back you go in the magic literature, the more crap they put on that umbrella. Like if you go back 100 years in the magic literature, then they said misdirection about everything that wasn't a clear direction of how to hold something. Like they could say that and then take the apple and make it vanish with your best misdirection, and readers will go, what? And it's I'm struggling with that myself at the moment, because I'm writing a piece about the topic, and I would say that misdirection has to do with the performance-centric techniques of managing attention. Like there's ways of managing attention that you can build into the trick. Like if you open a wallet, people will look at the wallet. and that's sort of built in. You don't need to do anything extra for it. But I would say that that's the stuff that the creator of the trick can put into the trick. But misdirection is what the performer need to add by themselves. And it's also difficult to say, because I mean, what is attention? It's as soon as you start to question what the words mean, you are getting into like very uncertain territories. Like what the hell is attention? How can I define what attention is? Is it what people are looking at? Well, sometimes people are looking straight at things and they don't see it anyway. So is that attention then? No. Is it where you look? That's the attention? No. Is it what you're thinking about? That's not really it either, because you can still be thinking about paying your bills and whatnot and still discover that, oh, there's a thing peeking out there. So yeah, every term that you use to describe it, when you look closer at that term, a lot of other crap pours out. And it's like, but if we are, if we allow ourselves to use very inexact terms, I would say that misdirection is performance-centric techniques of attention management. And that maybe sounds a lot more definitive than what I probably think, but there you go.
So, do you think then, just building off of what you said about the term itself, misdirection, so do you think there is utility to even using the term at all, or are there better terms or subcategories that we should be discussing instead?
The thing is that the term, there have been people like authorities in the field who have suggested alternative terms, but the thing is that the word is so ingrained in the literature and in magic itself that I think it's probably easier to change the definition of the word than to change the word. That we change what we mean with the word than come up with a new word.
So why do you think that misdirection works?
Well, it is part of being human. But I mean, we need to sift the information that are constantly coming our way. That if we were to stop and really examine everything that came towards us, all the bits of information coming towards, we wouldn't be able to live. We wouldn't be able to move. It would be overwhelming. So we have all these gambits and tricks and mental constructs of how to sift and categorize and put things in brackets and replacing things for symbols and templates and creating patterns where no patterns exist. And all this is a way of this rule-based thinking where we jump to conclusions and are just lucky that our jumped to conclusions are somewhere in the vicinity of the reality enough for us to survive. And in doing that, that's a shitload of things that we don't take into consideration. And so if we know how we sift through the reality, we can use that knowledge in making methods that go different paths. Now I've forgotten what you asked, but
Well, I think you answered it. I asked why misdirection
yeah.
works, and so I think that answered the question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the next question is misdirection necessary for creating magic?
It's necessary for performing magic, and I think, and it depends. I mean, sometimes the layers of deception is built into the piece. So if you learn the piece the way it's meant to be, you can perform it without adding anything of your own, and it will still work. Because the creator have put the cat and mouse game into the construction of the trick, that you don't have to understand it yourself. You just have to walk through it and reap the benefits of the work that someone else have done.
So would you not include those like built-in features of those tricks as an aspect of misdirection?
No, because I would classify that as a part of the composition of magic, where the actions you need to do in order to accomplish the trick have a dual purpose, that it also provide misdirection, so that you don't have to. So it happens. So you can't forget to add the misdirection because it's already there. Mm. Because I think, for me as an artist, I think it's a piece is more artistic if all that is built into the trick, so that so it always works. I mean, if I put it in the hands of someone else, they should be able to perform it, and it shouldn't require them to add extra misdirection if it's well constructed.
So when using misdirection, what methods are you likely to employ and when do you use them?
I'm using the Ramsey technique and the Slidini techniques. There are other techniques as well, but I'm in 99% of the cases, that's what I'm using. And it's so it's like deciding where and when I look myself. I try to coordinate my gaze with my movements, and I try to coordinate my vectors, so that my movement vectors is aiding the piece. Yeah. Yep. So that's it. So it's choreographical in nature.
So what do you mean by like vector?
Well, if I illustrate the trick with stick figures, and I go move the hand like this, and I make an arrow like that. That's what I call a vector, and so that do you know the Slidini classification of movements? Do you recognize that?
I think
Otherwise,
so.
I can give you a quick explanation.
Yeah, maybe explain it.
Yeah. Well, the first tenet is that you cannot look at two things at the same time, right? If you have two things to look at, you must decide what to look at first and what to look at second. And what he researched was to figure out if there's a system to predict what people will look at first and what to look at second. And he figured out that if you have two things and one is moving, you always go to the moving thing first before you look at the static thing. If you have two things that are moving, and one is going up and the other is going down, the vector upwards is what's catching the attention before the movement down. Right? If you have one movement that comes towards you and one movement that goes away from you, you always look at the thing that comes towards you first. He stopped there, but I have continued, so I have discovered a couple of extra things, like if I have a thing that goes up, I can sort of cancel that out by putting something else either in front or on a higher level. And if they move in unison, you will look at the foremost thing or uppermost thing first. So that's the choreographical things in nature.
So what factors do you think make those kinds of methods effective?
Well, I mean, they all rely on the lizard brain, so to speak. That it's we are affected by the, even when we know about it. I mean, when I see these techniques in pieces that people perform for me, I fall for it. Then I can reconstruct it in retrospect, but in a moment, I am just as much a sucker as anyone else. So that there's no way to be immune for it. Like pieces that rely on that works whether you want it or not. It's for everyone who is human.
And then what factors do you think make misdirection ineffective?
It's probably when you haven't quite understood it, or when you rely on too old definitions. Like I know friends who have tried the Ramsey techniques and can't make them work, and that's because they only read Ramsey's explanation and haven't read what other people have added to it. Like, for example, like you forgot something. You should have taken something out of the pocket secretly at one point, and you forget it, and you go, oh no, okay. If I do what Ramsey said, I look at something in myself, and you look at something at the table, and you go, okay, now I'm looking at it. No one will notice me, and everyone sees, because as Saidini said, if everything is motionless and something moves, that's what you look at. So in order for this to work, you need to coordinate it so that you move your gaze at the same time as the hand moves. Because then you have two things that happens at the same time. And when two things happen, the spectator's brain must just decide on what to look at first. And once they have decided on what to look for, then you know that they are not looking at the other thing.
So next we want to talk a bit about offbeats. So the first question is, what is an offbeat?
It has to do with the dramatic intensity. Like when you get into like a performance mindset, you realize that if you push the effects too fast, people are not ready to, they can't process it. So it becomes that they shut off instead. They get something glassy in their eyes, like they are zoning out. Like if you do too many tricks in a too quick succession, they just go. And you can't really communicate with them anymore. So you can't push it too fast, but you don't want to wait too long either, because we have this analytical thinking where you question what you have experienced. Like that's a part of the analytic thinking, that you go, okay, my rule-based thinking can't solve this. I need to stop, and I need to question what I have assumed to be true. And you start to pick apart the assumptions you have been making. So when people are thinking analytically, they can figure things out. So you don't want to wait too long, because then people might get into the analytical thinking and they might deconstruct what you have done. So you don't want to wait too long either. You want to pace it, so you make something intriguing, and then you relax, so that they can go in their head like, oh, wow, and then they come back to you, and just as they come back to you, you come back to them, right? So you have this kind of billowing movement of intensity and interest and attention, and like on the offbeat, they can sort of turn to their friends and say, I don't understand what's happened, and they come back to you. So you have this attention and intensity where you sort of, now something will happen, and now we can relax, and now something can happen. And a part of the rule-based thinking is that when something happens, that is also when the cause of something happens, when you perceived the outcome, sort of, that if the light goes out, you assume that the safety plug have gone. It's not that the safety plug goes and a week later the lights cancel. You have this strong association with that. If something happens, the thing that caused it must have happened at the same time. Right? So when you move into the effect with intensity, people assume that, okay, here is when I need to pay attention, because now he seems to be doing something. But if I'm doing all my sneaky stuff when I'm relaxing and everyone is looking at each other, I can get away with a lot more. So I do something trick, and when it seems like I'm relaxing, I'm working like hell to prepare for the next thing. But keeping like a calm face, like, and then I move into it, and now I make something new happen, and people assume that is when it happened. So that's the offbeat, the valley in the peaks of valley of interest and intensity and attention.
So, do you think using an offbeat is misdirection?
Yes, it would be a performance-centric technique of that's something you add as a performer. It's not really built into the trick. It's something that you have to add as a performer. So in my classification, I would say that's misdirection.
So, do you think it's an effective form of misdirection?
Yes, but with everything, if you over rely on it, it becomes a pattern, and as soon as a pattern, people will discover it. So I gladly use it, but sparingly, with caution. So yes, like for example, if I've done a bunch of card tricks and people have been shuffling the deck, at one point in the offbeat, I must lean forward and separate in red and black, and then put it on the table. And maybe half a minute later, I can go, oh, let me show another thing. And I pick up what they assumed is a deck that have been shuffled by 10 people for an hour. And that might be the only thing I do on the offbeat in the whole performance.
Okay, and so then the last thing that we wanted to ask you about is exposure. So I know you said before that you don't really have a problem giving away your effects to people if they ask. So do you think that that impacts their experience or appreciation of magic going forward after that?
I find that those people appreciate it more, and it makes them more interested. Exposure, I would say, the problem with exposure is three things. Like, first of all, the person doing exposure is usually not the creator of the effect, right? They teach someone else's work with no consideration for if that person wants his work to be taught or not. The second is that exposure is usually given to people who haven't asked for it yet. Like it's given to it's sort of people who haven't. It's one thing to see something impossible and start to think, how would I do it? I can't figure it out. I can't do it. And then you ask, because then you have a vested interest in the puzzle. And then you ask, and you see some recognition on the performer that, okay, this person really wants to know. And then you get explains, and it's different from just going about your life and go like, oh, I wonder if my sister's dogs have had these cubs yet, and you go on to the Facebook, and the first thing you see is someone exposing a trick that you haven't seen performed yet. It's sort of and the tricks they are exposing are usually not the best tricks anyway, because they are chosen because they are easy to expose. They are not chosen because they are well constructed. Because a well constructed piece might have 4 or 5 different layers of deception, and that would take like an hour to explain. So that's not it's not the best magic they reveal, but they reveal like crappy magic and with the aura of this is all it is, and that sort of cheapens it, and also they don't give any kind of historical context, like they are not mentioning who created it. They don't mention if is this old and traditional, or was this created last year. So you get this knowledge which is completely isolated from anything the laypersons are interested in, and completely isolated from what the magician is interested in. So it's only used for the views. It's never to add substance or value or anything like that. So I mean, I don't have a real problem with exposure, but I think they are highly insulting and I think they are pointless.
Okay, well, that was the last question we had. So thank you very much for all your answers.